Alright, welcome to the Strange North channel. In this video, I'm just going to tell you briefly about two men that disappeared in British Columbia. Now, the disappearances of these two men aren't related, but a while back, David Paulides and the Can-Am Missing Project highlighted these two cases, and I found them interesting. Basically, two guys with very similar sounding last names disappeared about 8 miles from one another about a year apart. And these two men aren't related to one another, and the cases aren't related either. I just found it interesting that there were these two notable cases where the men had very similar last names, and they each disappeared from the same general vicinity. Now, in the first case I'm going to tell you about, this individual did go missing, but then he was found deceased later under strange circumstances. And in the second case I'm going to tell you about, this guy has never been found. And I'm just going to jump right into these cases. So on Friday, June 5th, 2015, there was a 20-year-old man named Sukhjeet Saggu who drove with his friends to Chilliwack Lake Provincial Park, and they were going to hike the Lindeman-Greendrop trail, which is a moderately difficult 3.5-kilometer hike through thick old growth forest. This trail starts by the parking lot off the Chilliwack Lake Road and follows a stream called Post Creek north to the beautiful and picturesque Lindeman Lake. And so as Sukhjeet and his friends were starting this hike, Sukhjeet decided to jog ahead of his friends and then meet up with them later at the lake. But when the group of friends arrived at Lindeman Lake, Sukhjeet was not there, and Mr. Saggu's friends searched for him until 4 a.m. the following morning, and during this time they were unable to call for help because in this area of the park they couldn't get any cell reception. And so they searched for their friend all night, and then the next morning this group encountered a hiker who offered to return to his vehicle and drive until he could get cell reception, where he would notify the RCMP, and he would do this while the friends continued to search in the park. And so this guy does just what he says. He gets in his car, finds cell reception, and calls the local RCMP. And pretty soon the RCMP as well as a search and rescue team from Chilliwack arrive at the park, and they searched the park extensively until dark that night. Now, the spokesperson for the search and rescue organization named Doug Fraser made several news appearances where he expressed surprise and even shock in not finding Mr. Saggu, as most people missing in this area are found within hours. The trails in this area are very well marked, and this park has a lot of hikers and activity. And so the search resumed the following morning, and they were later joined by RCMP helicopters. And while one of these helicopters was flying over the trail from Lindeman Lake to Greendrop Lake, the pilot spotted Sukhjeet's body laying in a graded boulder field pretty far from the main trail. And as ground teams made their way to the spot, they found the body, and it indeed was Sukhjeet Saggu, and he was deceased. And the next day, on June 7th of 2015, in a CBC article, the search and rescue spokesperson Doug Fraser again talked about the very strange circumstances in which Saggu's body was found. First off, Saggu said that he would run ahead and then meet his friends at Lindeman Lake, but he was a lot further than Lindeman Lake. He was found on the way from Lindeman to Greendrop Lake, which is not where he talked about exploring with his friends before he set off. His body was also found at a significantly higher elevation than the lake or the trail system, and this is pretty unusual with people that get lost. Usually people that wander off eventually make their way downhill, and it is notable that his body was found at a much higher elevation than the lake or the trail system. Now, his injuries were consistent with a fall, but it was unsure if he had slipped and tumbled down this graded boulder field or if he had fallen from a cliff overlooking this boulder field. In a June 8th, 2015 information bulletin by the BC Coroner's Service, Representative Leanna Wright said that Sukhjeet Saggu had died after suffering an accidental fall while hiking, but that the coroner's service continued to investigate his death, which was a little bit confusing. And so obviously this was a very hard thing for Sukhjeet's family and friends to go through. At least they had Sukhjeet's body, and so they could get some sort of closure in this case, but it was just very confusing as to how he actually died and how he made his way to the spot where his body was found. It deviated wildly from the route that he told his friends he was going to travel down, and there's really just very limited information on this case, and my heart goes out to Sukhjeet's family and friends. And so this happened in June of 2015, and then the next year, in August of 2016, only about 8 air miles away from where Sukhjeet's body was found, another man went missing, and he had a very similar last name to Sukhjeet. On Sunday, August 14th of 2016, there was a 50-year-old man named Gordon Sagoo, and he was hiking with two friends to Baby Munday Peak when he walked ahead of his group to explore another area and vanished. Gordon was a life coach and personal fitness trainer, and he was in excellent shape, and he had gotten there from being fairly out of shape, and so his story was really inspiring to a lot of people. His friends said that he was physically and mentally very strong. He had even taken up long-distance running in his mid-40s and completed several grueling marathons. And the area of Baby Munday Peak is in the Cheam mountain range in BC's Fraser Valley region near Chilliwack. Again, this was about 8 air miles from where Sukhjeet Saggu was found dead. And so on August 14th of 2016, Gordon Sagoo had decided to hike to this Baby Munday Peak alone while his friends hiked to a nearby lake, and he said that they would all meet up at this lake later. And very similar to what happened in 2015 with Sukhjeet Saggu, the same sort of thing happened again. Gordon Saggoo's friends gathered at this lake where he said he would meet them, and he was nowhere to be found. Apparently Gordon did have his cell phone with him, but no one was able to get through to him. And so of course Gordon's friends were very worried, and they searched extensively until they eventually called search and rescue. Search and rescue crews were called out that evening, and a massive search ensued. They had police dogs, drones, ground teams, helicopters, and people using thermal imaging cameras. But after an intensive week of searching this entire area, the search was officially called off on August 21st. Gordon's family and friends would continue to search the area extensively over the following months and even years. And his family also started a GoFundMe that raised over $30,000 to help extend the search and help with expenses. But to this day, no clues were ever found. This is a quote from Gordon's niece, Manpreet Gill. Quote, "This has been one of the most agonizing and challenging times our family has gone through. Nothing has been harder than returning home each day without him. He is strong, determined, resilient. There isn't a powerful enough word to describe my uncle." And that's pretty much the story of Gordon Sagoo. To this day, no clues have ever been really found, and my heart goes out to his family and friends. That must have been an absolutely horrible thing to go through. And of course, these two cases aren't necessarily related, and neither are these two men. Even though they had similar sounding last names, they were spelled differently. But I just found it interesting that these two guys with very similar last names disappeared within 8 air miles from one another a year apart. And of course, Sukhjeet Saggu went missing and was eventually found deceased, and Gordon Sagoo was never found at all. But these interesting disappearances don't happen every day, and I just found these two cases to be notable. And I'm still of two minds when talking about these missing persons cases. On one hand, I realize that talking about them could be, and probably is at times, painful for the family and friends of these people that went missing. But I'm also just fascinated by these cases, and I think it can be useful and helpful to talk about them for a couple reasons. Number one, it can be a good thing to raise awareness for people that disappear and might be forgotten in time. I think it can also be good to raise awareness in case those people are still out there and need assistance, and I think it's good for more people to be aware of these certain cases so they can be on the lookout. And number two, I think it's useful to talk about disappearances to highlight some of the risky ways in which people go missing. Not that these two individuals did anything wrong necessarily, but there are definitely steps you can take as an individual to keep yourself safe and reduce your likelihood of going missing. For example, David Politis, who runs the Canada Missing Project, has noted that no one has gone missing if they have a firearm and an emergency transponder on them. Many people have gone missing who have one or the other, but it seems like if someone has a gun and an emergency transponder that are both working, then they don't go missing. And that's just really a side note, and of course I have my definite criticisms of David Politis, but he did notice that in his research. And it's definitely not a bad idea to have a firearm and a transponder if you're really wandering deep into the Canadian wilderness. And again, my heart goes out to the family and friends of Sukhjeet, who went missing and was eventually found deceased, as well as the family and friends of Gordon Sagoo, who was never found. I hope you found that interesting and informative, and if you'd like to watch more of my content in general, please consider subscribing to my channel. I upload about 1 new video per week. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Strange North channel.